Hello, Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the Brooklyn Nets. But before we do that, I want to take a look at the rebuild, and specifically the Toronto Raptors assets that they have available to them during this rebuild, and what we can expect from those assets moving forward, what they could turn into, and what the long-term outlook for the team is. And I kind of want to break down each individual asset, and we will start off the list by talking about the Toronto Raptors' most valuable asset, their most valuable player, the player that they have been discussing building the team around, the player that I'm the highest on and I think has the most potential. And of course, I am referring to Scottie Barnes. Scottie Barnes is not only the best player on the Toronto Raptors currently, he also, in my opinion, has the highest ceiling moving forward. I think that he still has a lot of room to grow, which is impressive considering last season he was an all-star. He probably won't make it this year, but that's really just because he has missed a lot of time due to injury. But he has actually played very well this season. He has shown a lot of new elements to his game in terms of making plays for other players. He's added a lot of moves to his offensive repertoire. I think his defense has improved, and he has become one of the better defensive forwards in the NBA. I really just think that he is beginning to scrape the surface of what he's capable of, and he has really just sort of blossomed into a player that looks like it is worth the time and effort to build around him. Large lead ball handlers are the most valuable asset in the NBA. Luka Doncic, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic. The league is dominated by large playmaking forwards and bigs. It has become more and more prevalent within the NBA to feature the large ball handler on offense because it allows you to have a lot of skill on the perimeter, players who can make shots. Really helps to maximize your offense. And that is one of the reasons why every team is looking for one of those players. And I think Scottie Barnes has the potential to blossom into that type of player. And once he gets enough talent around him, especially shooting talent, I believe that he's going to take off and become one of those types of players. So I'm very excited for him to be on the Toronto Raptors. I think he's their most valuable asset. Moving down the list, this might be a controversial take, but I really do believe that this upcoming draft is a special one. There are a lot of very intriguing prospects, especially at the top of the draft. There are a lot of really exciting players, guys who look like they have the potential to reshape a franchise. Last year's draft was considered by many to be kind of weak at the top. There wasn't real superstar talent in that draft. This draft is different. This draft is seen as one of the strongest in years. There is an number one franchise talent in Cooper Flagg, and then there are a bunch of very solid and very intriguing prospects with really high upside. And if the Toronto Raptors finish with a poor record, I mean, they are on track to do that this season, they will have a pick of probably some of these guys at the top of the draft. And those players will have some real potential. Guys who can grow with the young core of the Toronto Raptors, can be featured within the offense, and, hit their prime when the Toronto Raptors are starting to get good. So I think that this pick in this coming draft is going to be very, very important for the Raptors, and it will give them the opportunity to add the second potential superstar alongside Scottie Barnes that could really elevate the Toronto Raptors to a contender in the near future. We've seen things like this happen before. Perhaps you could see it maybe something like what happened with the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was also reaching the beginning of his prime when they started adding the other players to the team, like Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. So he was already a pretty established star at that point when they started adding those players. But they've been able to grow along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and of course, they are one of the top teams in the league. So I think that there is a lot of potential at the top of this draft. I think it's honestly probably their second best long-term asset. What's next is going to be kind of controversial because I think that once you talk about Scottie Barnes as a very obvious number one, number two, the NBA draft pick that the Toronto Raptors have this season, also extremely valuable. And then you get into perhaps I would consider maybe tier 2 assets. And it's not to say that these players aren't going to be good players, and it doesn't even mean that they couldn't be the best or maybe second best asset on this list. Maybe they take a big jump from where they are now, but this is kind of where things drop off a little bit in terms of my perceived quality. And even the ordering here might be a little controversial. I'm sure that you can let me know in the comments whether you think that I'm off base or whether I'm right on the money. So the listing here maybe isn't as important because in terms of a tiered list, this is the second tier, so don't get too upset about the order here. I'm considering them all similar in terms of what I expect from them. The first of the tier 2, I will say, is RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett came into his tenure with Toronto as, I believe, kind of a throw-in in the Emmanuel Quickley OG Anunoby trade, where he was seen as a negative asset. I've discussed this many times in the past. He has taken a big jump from where many other experts within the NBA pegged him to be. And he has grown and emerged as a, I would say, just under star caliber point guard for the Toronto Raptors. And I think that he's been a very positive force for the Toronto Raptors, even though it hasn't really translated to wins at this point. And I don't think that RJ is a perfect player. I think that there are significant flaws to his game. I think that there are things that he needs to work on and get better at. I think that there are things that maybe he will never be good at. But in terms of where he was and where he is currently, I am just over the moon in terms of what he has been able to do and show in a Toronto Raptors jersey. I think that he has shown himself to be a capable offensive player who I feel comfortable with the ball in his hands. And he has the ability to create for himself going to the basket, and he has the ability to create for others as well out of the pick and roll. And I think that that's a very valuable thing in the NBA. It's difficult to find players who are good scorers and also good at distributing the basketball and running an offense. And maybe you disagree with my placement of him as the third best asset on the Toronto Raptors, but I feel pretty confident putting him there, and I'm excited to continue to watch him. Next up, we have Emmanuel Quickley. And this is probably the most difficult to peg because Emmanuel Quickley, I was very high on him coming to the Toronto Raptors. I was very excited when the Toronto Raptors were able to acquire him for OG Anunoby. I thought that his contributions on the New York Knicks, what he was able to do coming off of the bench, his shooting ability, his ability to create his own shot off of the dribble, some of the skills that he had as a guard are some of the most important skills that you can have as a guard in the NBA. We've seen a lot of players take a jump from strong starter to star using this mold. So Tyrese Maxey is one player. Jamal Murray, when he was actually playing better than he is now before all of the injuries, is another player. Donovan Mitchell is another player in that mold. So a scoring guard, a player who can create their own shot off of the dribble, a player who can utilize screens in order to come off shooting, and then a player who can help run your offense. Maybe they're not the most skilled in terms of making plays, but so much of NBA offense is the ability to create your own shot. And Emmanuel Quickley is an elite player at doing that. I really do believe that his shooting ability and ability to create his own shot could be among some of the very best in the NBA. The only problem with this evaluation is that it's hard to evaluate. He has not played enough minutes for the Toronto Raptors where I can feel comfortable slotting him into a player that I believe can make that jump. He has been plagued by injuries. He has really not been able to stay healthy either last season or this one. So I can't place him any higher than I have him right now, which is fourth on this list, but I do think that he has potential, and I think that there's a lot of potential synergy that he could have, especially with Scottie Barnes moving forward. Next up, Grady Dick. And I think that a lot of people see the promise with Grady Dick. He has made some big strides. He had another very exciting performance last night. His athleticism has been a big surprise. He does have a lot of exciting qualities. He does have some downsides as a player, which I've mentioned, but I do see him as an important piece for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. And maybe you think that I have him a little too low on the list because he has been an exciting player and he has made those strides. And there are other people who have similar weaknesses on the list, so it's not like he is one of the only players who has a significant weakness. which is, I mean, beating around the bush. Defense. Manuel quickly has question marks there. RJ Barrett has question marks there. Grady Dick also has some defensive question marks. But I do think that he has potential, and maybe you think that this is an incorrect rating for him, but I do see him as in the second tier of assets for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. I think that grouping these guys together makes a lot of sense. I think that they can be solid contributors for a competing Raptors team, and they do have potential to move up in the ranking and become a star player as well. It's not saying that this is the cap for them. It's just kind of where I see them right now. And next on the list, we have Ochai Agbaji. Ochai Agbaji has emerged as a very strong role player for the Toronto Raptors. He had another great game last night as well. He is a strong defender. He is a strong shooter. He has shown that he has a little bit more to his game than just 3-and-D. He can drive to the rim. He can make plays for others. He's a really good cutter. He is showing all of those skills that you want to see from an off-ball player. And I really think that he has elevated himself from a cast-off. I really did not have any expectations for him this season, and he has risen so far above them that I am just tickled that he is in the same tier as the, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Grady Dick. The fact that he is in this second tier is really impressive, and I think that he even has potential to get higher. I really think that there's a sturdy base to build an even better player upon, because he has those ground floor elements of a strong NBA player that I think you can start stacking skills on top of to really create a very impressive two-way player. So very happy with his growth as a player and as an asset for the Toronto Raptors. And then rounding out the tier 2, we have Jacoby Walter. Again, you might think that this is a little low to have him on the list. I'm putting him here tentatively. I think that he has the most swing variance here. I think that he has shown a lot of potential. I'm really digging what I'm seeing from him as a rookie, but he still needs to prove it. He still needs to be able to take the steps towards becoming a strong NBA player. I'm confident he can do it. I am seeing the growth. I'm seeing the potential and the little sparks that catch your eye. And I think that his potential on the defensive end is a lot stronger than some of the other prospects on this team. I think that his shooting splits right now are pretty poor, but I'm liking the process. I am enjoying what I'm seeing from him, and the way his shot looks is very important. As any scout will tell you, it's about the form and not simply looking at the percentages. And I think that he does have that upside potential, but I'll put him at the bottom of tier 2 right now, just because I'm not completely confident that he's going to get there. Right now, the results are not great. The process is encouraging. The results aren't there yet. I need to see him continue to get better, continue to improve. So that's tier 2. And now we get into the second tier assets. And I'm not going to go into all of them. The Toronto Raptors have some picks moving down the road. It's hard to evaluate those pieces because I don't know what direction the Toronto Raptors are going to be moving in. If this is going to be a slower rebuild, then maybe the first round picks down the road are going to be worth more. If this is going to be a quicker rebuild and they're looking to compete next season, those picks are going to be worth less. So it's hard to evaluate. So let's look at the players on the roster. And this is kind of the third tier of assets. And here at the top of the list, I have Jonathan Mobo. I think that his floor as a player is going to put him above, spoiler alert, Jamal Shed is also on this list. I'm going to put him above Jamal Shed for the time being, though that could easily be wrong. But I think Jonathan Mobo, at this point, the floor is kind of established. I think that he is going to have a pretty good career in the NBA, just based on the fact that his defense is good, his rebounding, offensive rebounding especially, is strong. He can handle the ball and make plays a little bit. He's a smart player, and his measurements is he has very long arms. I think he can stick in the NBA as a role player at this point. I think that the Toronto Raptors are going to continue to develop him. I think he'll be a piece on this team moving forward. I'm excited to see his development. I also think his ceiling is a little underrated at this point, especially if he can shoot the ball. He has shown a little bit of that, but right now the results are inconclusive, so you can't really say either way. He could become a shooter. He could easily, that just is a phase that passes. But I'm intrigued with him as a player. Next up, we'll go on to Jamal Shed. As a prospect, he is starting to come on. He had a really good start to the season. He had hit a swoon, was not playing very well on either end, and he's kind of made a comeback, and now he is draining three-point shots, and he's running the offense and looking very strong as a backup point guard. I'm really liking what I'm seeing from him, but it's been up and down this season, and I think the floor is lower for Jamal Shed. And the reason I say that is because at the smaller guard positions, you have to have that shooting ability. That is really one of the make or break skills from a guard. And he has done a good job showing me that he has that potential to be able to shoot the ball. And I'm excited to watch him develop as a prospect. He needs to be a little bit more consistent and show me that he can do it for a longer stretch. But I'm pleased with him. I think that the Toronto Raptors, he's given me enough reason to expect him to be the Toronto Raptors backup point guard projected down the road. So interested to see him play for the Toronto Raptors moving forward. And then after that, Jamison Battle, I'm not really gonna, I'll pencil him in. He is an interesting player, no doubt about it. Undrafted. He's still on a two-way contract. I'm liking what I'm seeing. He can shoot the ball. I think he has potential to be a role player in the NBA, but it's not like he's some unmovable asset. And he's kind of rounding out the list there. But yeah, let me know what you think about the rankings, what you think about the Toronto Raptors, how their asset base is as a club. I'm pretty excited. I think that they've got a good core of players that have the potential to eventually lead the Toronto Raptors to success. I don't think it's happening this season, but projected down the road, I think that the Toronto Raptors have some interesting players in their stable. Of course, I left off players like Jakob Poeltl off of the list. I still really like Jakob Poeltl as a player. Don't get me wrong. I could see him being part of the team moving forward, so maybe it's not fair to leave him off of this list, but I did anyway. So don't take this as an indictment of Jakob Poeltl. If he's on the team a couple of years from now, I'd be fine with that. If they trade him, I'd also understand. But I want to square that away before we get into the player evaluations. But we should get into the player evaluations because the Toronto Raptors had a game yesterday, and a frustrating game. They were ahead for a lot of the night. I think that there were a lot of things that they did well. The Raptors were able to create a lot of really sick highlights. It was a fun game to watch, but they ended up falling to the Brooklyn Nets, 101-94. But we will go through the list. We will start with Scottie Barnes. And we'll start with him not because I think that he had a fantastic game. I think he had a mixed game, but he did return from injury. So I think he's probably the most noteworthy player playing, maybe not the best player, although I do think he had a pretty good return to the Toronto Raptors. Scottie Barnes had 16 points on 11 shots. He was 2 of 6 from 3, which is okay. 3 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 blocks, 3 turnovers in 36 minutes. So they didn't waste any time giving him those big minutes as he returned to the Raptors. I think he did a pretty good job scoring the ball. He had a couple of issues, I think, with his playmaking. I think he was overzealous at times. I think it was just rust, honestly. And I think that he had a good defensive night as well, which, you know what, considering what he brings to the table on the defensive end, I will say that he was the best player for the Toronto Raptors. He had a couple of clutch moments, a couple of unclutch moments. He turned the ball over in the fourth when he drove into the paint and pushed off his defender. It was the right call. He was too overzealous, and he was not able to close the deal for the Toronto Raptors. You can't do it by yourself, though, and the whole team kind of collapsed at the end. They're really missing Jakob Poeltl's screens in order to create separation, in order to create easy looks going to the basket. The dump-off option, he's a huge piece in the paint where he is able to catch and finish. They were missing that too. But Scottie Barnes, I think, did a good job. He was excellent in different parts of the game. I thought his defense was very strong. He does a good job. Players don't want to drive on him when he's standing in the paint. I think he could have been better on the boards. The Toronto Raptors really need defensive rebounds with Jakob Poeltl sitting. Scottie Barnes is kind of a big. He's like a power forward point guard. But on the defensive end and in terms of rebounding, he is one of the bigs on the team. He needs to grab more boards. He only had 3 defensive rebounds. I think that could have been better. But otherwise, I think in his return to action, he could have really put up a stinker, honestly. And there were certain parts in the game moving into the second quarter where it looked kind of like he was out of sorts and wasn't going to have a good game. But I think that he rounded into form and did have a pretty solid game. So yeah, that's Scottie Barnes, first player we'll talk about. Next up, we got to give it to Ochai Agbaji. And Ochai Agbaji continues to be a very good role player for the Toronto Raptors, and maybe even starting to enter the conversation of a bit more. He was the Toronto Raptors' leading scorer last night. He had 20 points on 16 shots, which is great. He was 4 of 8 from 3, excellent. 5 rebounds, an assist, a steal, no turnovers. In fact, maybe he should have been the first player mentioned today. I am just very happy with Ochai Agbaji. And I feel like when the team is whole, they should be featuring him a little bit more on offense. I feel like he can be the forgotten man when he's playing with, say, RJ Barrett, when he's in the lineup, Jakob Pertl when he's there as well, that when there are more mouths to feed, that he can be the guy that is maybe left out a little bit. But I think that he brings so much to the table with his cutting, his shooting ability. He's really hunting shots. That's what I am most pleased about him and most intrigued about him as a player, is his shooting ability and the ability to be not just a floor spacer, where you saw him being a corner merchant at the beginning of the season, being really successful there. He's starting to move up and down the arc. He's starting to come off of screens and catch the ball and shoot. I'm just really pleased with his development as a player, and I think that he's starting to show that he is, if not the most well-rounded player on the roster, one of. And he has skills in almost every department. He can cut, he can shoot, he can play defense, he can guard small to forward-sized players. He is a good finisher near the rim. He's athletic. He looks just like a solid NBA pro, and I'm really digging what he's bringing for the Toronto Raptors. Like, that trade has been nothing short of like a steal for the Raptors. Trading a late first for a guy who can really be that glue player that holds good teams together. And what's great about him is that he still has another year on his contract, and then he becomes a restricted free agent. Maybe I should have mentioned this in the asset section, but he is going to be a restricted free agent as well after his contract is through, once they pick up his club option this coming season. So yeah, Ochai Agbaji, great trade. Next up, we'll talk Grady Dick. I thought Grady Dick had a really encouraging performance, especially from a shooting perspective. And this is one of the things that I've kind of been ragging on him for, is that he is a shooting, well, I don't want to say shooting specialist, but he is a shooter, a guy who projects to be a strong NBA shooter, but he has not really been very consistent from three-point range this season and even last season. Last night was great from that perspective. He banged a bunch of really nice threes. The first shot of the game that he made was a three that was pretty well contested at the top of the arc. When I start seeing those types of shots go in, I really start getting excited, because I feel like his potential as a scorer is predicated around that shooting ability. If he can put a bunch of shots up and have a bunch of them go in, then his skill set is starting to look really attractive. He had a really sick tip dunk last night where he kind of flew in from the corner after Scottie Barnes missed a turnaround and collected it and slammed it home. It was smooth. It was athletic. He got up. This was not just a struggle to get it over the rim. No, this was like a real putback slam. He is showing the ability that when he gets ahead of steam, he's very quick, moving in a straight line. So that's why I foresee him being able to be a contributor on the break. I think he has potential there. And I'd love to see that more. Even if there's somebody in the paint, I'd love to see him dunk it more, because I think that that's a good option for him. I don't think he has to settle for the circus layup shots. He's okay at those with the creative finishing, but I'd love to make it less creative and just more physical, get more of those slams. But yeah, he's showing that he can be that type of athletic scoring guard that you like to see, the off-ball guard that can come off screens, bang shots, and then when needed, have an athletic finish in the paint. A super exciting night for him. He had 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 offensive rebounds. Love to see him using that athleticism. 2 assists, a steal, a block, and unfortunately 4 turnovers. But and then on defense, you got to mention it because his defense isn't great. He did have a couple of possessions where they were definitely targeting Grady Dick in order to get baskets. And I think that he's pretty good at funneling players into help defense, and that's a good thing when you have a shot blocker, or at least a big that you can funnel them into, like a la Jakob Pertl. Jakob Pertl is good at coming over and cutting off penetration. When you don't have a player like that, his defense can look a lot shakier. He's good at kind of riding on a guy's hip and guiding players into the help defense, but when there's no help defense, those turn into layups, and that's not great. So yeah, his defense wasn't very good last night, which is unfortunate. But, you know, I'm happy to see him contribute in other areas. After that, there were 2 rookies that had kind of so-so, maybe sub-mediocre games. We'll talk Jonathan Mobo because I think his defense was good last night. He did struggle to score last night, and that's where I'm starting to see some of his limitations, some of his issues as a player. He had 8 points on 11 shots. He is still lacking the ability to score in the paint, and he has some issues converting when there are help defenders around him. When he is not catching an alley-oop. He had a very nice alley-oop from Scottie Barnes last night in the first quarter. He is pretty athletic. He can get up above the rim, and he does have long arms to catch balls and finish. But he does lack the ability to finish. And I think that with his ball handling ability, his quick feet and ability to get into the paint, I think that if he works on his craft, works on his footwork, works on his layup package, his floater package, works on that finishing ability, he's going to be a much better player. As it stands right now, he doesn't quite have the moves or the touch to be able to finish around the rim, especially with NBA-sized players around him, NBA athletes around him. They make it difficult to score in the paint, and that's really where you want to see him be able to score. So not a very efficient night from him. He did have 4 assists, 2 steals, and only 1 turnover in 30 minutes, and he did play good defense, although I will say he's not a true big. He is not a rim protector in the way that a true center is. He's more of a energy big, and I think that his value for a team is to guard the perimeter, switch on pick and rolls, and he does provide a little bit of help, but it's not the kind of help that's going to be a deterrent, that is going to stop teams from trying to take it inside. I think that he does a pretty good job helping out in the paint, but it's not stopping teams from getting in the paint altogether, which a true center would be able to do. In the future, I mean, from a bench position, I think that that's totally acceptable. That may be where he contributes long term. He did take a couple of threes last night. I think his shot looks pretty good, but the results weren't there. He missed both of the shots. But I encourage him to continue trying. I think that that's a big swing skill for him. I think that if he adds that to his repertoire, he could be a lot more valuable as a player. And last up, Jacoby Walter. He had 7 points on 10 shots, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. It's still a learning process from him. He had a really nice play where he hit a 3 and 1. It was probably one of the highlights of the evening last night. Very exciting play. I like the looks of his moves. I like the thought process. I like when he's getting to the rim. He had a couple of moves where it took him all the way to the rim and he couldn't finish. He had a really nice closeout attack where he was able to get past his man. Then he Euro'd past the help defender at the rim. And if it were not for Cameron Johnson coming over and blocking his shot, it would have been an excellent highlight. He was trying to go to the opposite side of the rim and Cam Johnson blocked his shot, but it looks good. The moves look good. The process looks good. The efficiency is not there yet. And I think that'll come. He has some juice off of the dribble. I also think that his defense and his ability to move his feet is solid at this point. He's still a rookie. He's still very young. And NBA veterans can play rookies like a fiddle. It's just the unfortunate fact of the matter. But from a growth perspective, and if I was a scout, I would be saying these elements that are present right now may not be producing the results, but they look like NBA moves. And he looks like he's an NBA player. I'm liking what I'm seeing, but the results just have to get better, and I think that they'll come. And I'm excited to see the next chapter with him. Off the bench, there were no real standouts. I praised Jamal Shed prior to the game. He didn't have a great game. He did hit a 3. He was 2 of 7 from the field. He took 5 threes, made 1 of them. Like, this is how shooting variance works. It's crazy. You hit 2 threes out of 5, that's 40%, right? You're one of the best shooters in the league. You make 1 of 5, you're 20%, that you're out of the league, right? That's why shooting variance is crazy. 40% from 3, you take that any day. 20%, you're a bum, you know? So shooting, you have to look at it over a long scale, and he's been on an upward trajectory over the past, couple weeks. So can't judge him too harshly. I like that he is taking those threes and he is trying to make that happen, because that's what you need as a guard. You need to be able to make those shots. So I'm not going to criticize him there. I think he runs the team pretty well. I like his reads when he's using screens. I like it when he gets into the paint. He's looking to set guys up. He had 4 assists last night. Again, I like the process there. Last night it didn't quite materialize in terms of a production standpoint, but I'll be patient. Next up, Kelly Olynyk had a good statistical night, 18 minutes. He had 8 points, 2 of 5 shooting. He only took 1 3, missed that one, but then he was 4 of 4 from the line, so he had a pretty decently efficient night. He had a really nice alley-oop to Ochai Agbaji, so he had five assists, 6 rebounds. Like, he packed the stat sheet. He had 2 turnovers. The unfortunate part is that he's a long-term NBA vet, and his weaknesses are known at this point. He's not a good rim protector. Teams want to get into the paint and finish around him when he is there on the floor. It's just not a surprise. But I think that he performed his role last night pretty well, which is being a facilitator on offense and, being a crafty veteran and getting guys to foul him, being extremely sneaky, that kind of stuff. But he giveth and he taketh away. He's a mixed bag for sure. Not exactly over the moon about the performance, but can't be too negative either. Chris Boucher, he started the season on fire. He has been in a big time slump now. Last night, another slump. He's making mistakes all over the place. Every single one of his shots was a 3 last night, and he was only 1 of 5 from 3. You gotta mix it up a bit more. He's a big guy. Nick Claxton was sitting, or he was thrown out of the game. They're missing their best rim protector. You're 6'9" and athletic. Go into the paint and finish. I don't know. I just thought it was a bad game from him. I thought the process was wrong. I wasn't enjoying what I was seeing. Be more efficient. Do something that lifts this team up, because right now I'm not seeing it. Jamison Battle, the last player to receive minutes last night, I thought he was okay. He had 8 points on 7 shots, so, decent efficiency. He was 2 of 6 from 3. And I think, honestly, my expectations for him as a player, like a 2 of 6 from 3 performance from Scottie Barnes, I take that. From Jamison Battle, my expectations are a little bit better. Jamison Battle had a bunch of open shots last night. There was a breakdown in the third quarter when the Brooklyn Nets, the clock was winding down and they lost track of Jamison Battle, and he shot a wide open 3-point shot, which missed. I think that his role is to cash those open shots, and he hit a couple, but I think he could have done better. He is a little bit of a defensive liability. There's a reason he's in the game, and it's to bang shots, and he was not great from that perspective. It's about meeting expectations, and I don't quite think he met my expectations last night, so I'll say it wasn't a great game from him. And yeah, that was the game. Ben Taylor was on his BS last night. Nick Claxton is a volatile player, a little cuckoo. He got fouled by Kelly Olynyk going to the basket, and there was a foul called. I don't know if he didn't like the foul call. It was a weird play. Maybe he was just mad at the officials in general, but he kind of tossed the ball into the stands. And I get it. That is a technical foul. Give the guy a T. Ben Taylor runs towards him and hits him with a very emphatic T, blowing the whistle. This vibe that he gives off is just very insecure. I don't like watching games reffed by him. I feel like there's this, he doesn't seem to be very confident in his calls, or there's something is missing. I just don't like games called by him. And of course, neither does Fred VanVleet. He's the ref that Fred went off on a couple of seasons ago, the infamous Fred call out where he called out Ben Taylor and said that he sucks, with some other words added in there. But he was horrible. And after that, I think he knew he made a boo-boo. I think that he called a pretty friendly whistle for the Nets the rest of the way, but who knows? I can't see inside his head. I just don't like watching games reffed by him. But anyway, Claxton was tossed. The Nets are playing without their best rim protector for the rest of the evening, and the Raptors couldn't capitalize. They just kind of got their butts kicked by Cam Johnson, who just played out of his mind. He was awesome last night. They did a lot of switching on the perimeter, and it looked like the Nets were just hunting Grady Dick. They would put his man into the pick and roll to get Agbaji off of Cam Johnson, and so they could target him. It's tough when you're switching like that, and then Grady can't funnel him into the help defense, and he has to play a little bit more conservatively further off. And then it's just, he's an excellent shooter, and he has leveled up as an offensive player, especially a number one option for that Nets team. But they were winning in this game. entering the fourth quarter, and through the fourth quarter, they were ahead by almost double digits. They couldn't slow down Cam Johnson on one end, and then on the other end, it was really the lack of offensive execution. Jakob Poeltl is the guy who is calling a lot of the shots. His ability to read defenses with his dribble handoffs, make the correct play, provide those screens, score in the paint with a really nice layup package. They were missing all of those sorts of things. And then also secondary ball handling. When RJ Barrett is out of the game, the offense becomes a lot more stagnant because Scottie Barnes, as one of the only creators on the team, has to do pretty much everything, and they can key into that a lot more. I think that RJ Barrett could have had a field day against a Claxton-less Brooklyn Nets. So the Toronto Raptors close out their homestand, which I predicted big things for, prior to all of the injuries and sicknesses and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the homestand that could have been. Yeah, it just didn't materialize. And I don't think it's going to materialize for them. They play the Houston Rockets on Sunday. That one is going to be a tough game. The Rockets are a very good team. They have excellent defense, and they have good role players. They have good young players. They're well coached. It's going to be a tough game for the Toronto Raptors to win at home. I think that this Brooklyn Nets game was one of their best opportunities to get a win. And it looks like maybe just the tank is fully on now. But yeah, that's the episode. What do you think of my grading of the Toronto Raptors' future assets? Do you have a different list than me? Let me know here in the comments, and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. I love talking to Toronto Raptors fans. When you leave a comment, I will always try and respond. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. That helps the channel out. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.